So in Bologna, this kind of thing was what set the frame for artists who most of us have not heard of today. They're minor artists, but considered major for somebody working in the 16th century in art history, a man named Pellegrino Tibaldi. And I'm just showing you here one of his paintings to indicate how artists struggled with the notion of mania, of mannerism, of trying to find something new to appeal to patrons. Because art history really is as much about patronage and commissions as it is about artists. So it's all connected. In Bologna, the artistic choices were limited by the conservative patronage of the aristocracy and the churchmen. The interesting question for me then is, how was it possible in such a restricted milieu for the three young Carracci to effect a profound change in attitude, to promote, among other things, a turn to naturalism and a variety of new approaches to style and subject matter? I wanted to note a few of their accomplishments. This is just another example of an artist working in the Bolognese region, Salviati, and his figure of Charity. You can see how it fits with the Mannerist ideas. And here is an early painting by Annibale Carracci, The Baptism of Christ from 1584, where I think you can see there are still elements of Mannerism here, but he's trying to shift things a bit. So this is the struggle in art, of course. This is what the patrons want. So how do they deal with patronage and yet want to do something new? So, a few of their accomplishments. Their decisions to be artists were unusual because their fathers were not artists, and normally it went from father to son, occasionally to daughter, very rarely. Ludovico's father was a butcher, Agostino and Annibale's was a tailor. Interesting that in the 1570s, the fathers perceived art as a more lucrative and higher status profession than their own. The young Carraccis recognized the importance of travel to learn beyond the apprenticeship stage with a local master. They all apprenticed to local masters, then saw that this wasn't really feeding them. They visited Venice and other northern Italian cities to study contemporary work. They went on their own, individually. They were looking for a new artistic vocabulary, not the tired styles of the Bolognese, such as we've seen Tibaldi and Salviati, who had learned mannerism from art in Florence and Rome. In fact, they probably did not even go to Florence, they hated Florence. Florence was the place to be, they were against it. Aside from their studies of Venetian masters such as Titian, the Carracci also turned to actual life, drawing people and scenes in the streets and in their studio. And here's one, it's a small painting, has come to be known, The Bean Eater, which Annibale did clearly from one of his studio assistants or a friend. And people who have seen this painting, in fact, I saw it last June, and people with me said, oh, he's got the perspective wrong. You know, they were making aesthetic judgments on this painting, and I think that was the whole point of it for Annibale. That is, he was trying to catch a moment, and that was simply not considered art at the time. I would have liked to have brought in drawings to show you, but I was not able to get good enough digital images, so I'll talk a little bit about them later. In 1582, they drew people and they turned to actual life, drawing people and scenes in the streets and in their studio. In 1582, they founded an academy to support a system of education different from the traditional workshop technical training, drawing from the human model, emphasizing natural poses, and also working directly from nature and everyday life. Part of the training in this academy was based on lectures on anatomy and artistic theory. The Carracci's Academy was quickly famous, attracting artists and interested scholars from far beyond Bologna. The generation of artists that developed here, that is with them in their academy, dominated painting in the first decades of the 17th century internationally. The Carracci moved artistic production in Bologna from the focus of differentiation and organized manner of style resisting to external ideas towards centralization, open to new external influences and experimentation in styles, leading to, I think, Baroque complexity, a combination of naturalism with classical restraint and chiaroscuro dramatic effect. How they were able to do this is not just a question of their talent or persuasive abilities, but forces driving cultural development generally with a multiple catalyst for a new context, encouraging enough patrons to be courageous in their commissions. I show you here one of their most probably outrageous paintings of the time. Anibale's butcher shop, and this may relate to his uncle's butcher shop. There are arguments in the field now, but some people hold that these are actually portraits, a self-portrait of Annibale here, and portraits of his brother and his cousin Ludovico, with this notion of raw meat, you know, the raw materials of art. I don't know whether we in the 20th and 21st century are reading too much into this, but it certainly is tempting. Where you had portraits of butchers or genre scenes of butchers, they were usually just bust portraits. It was rare to have this kind of thing, but this became an interesting subject matter through the 17th century. And if I could just point out one thing, I can't help turning into an art historian. You have these guys who are engaging in their task, seemingly naturally drawn. And on the left, there is a man who looks like he's dressed in a kind of soldier's uniform and digging money out from his purse. And in fact, if you look at the way he's depicted, he has the kind of twist of the Mannerist, a serpentine figure. And so people, you know, theorize that the Carracci are making a statement. That was then, this is the old style, and this is us now in the new, digging into the stuff of matter and trying to make painting relate to people in a way that Mannerism clearly did not. To establish the argument about you know, the multiple catalysts, I decided to examine the economic, political, social, religious, and cultural situation of Bologna in the 16th century. In each area, there were new arrivals on the scene, men with a common goal. The common goal in all of these areas seemed to be to acquire knowledge through careful observation of nature and daily life, and to apply this understanding to effect a reinvigoration of their respective fields. Politically, in this period, Bologna was restored to the full authority of the Pope and a central role in the Papal States. Located in the foothills of the Alps, it was the major link between Rome and the northern territories. A canal and river system provided the major means of transportation for people and products across the north to Venice. With a population second only to Rome, of all the cities in the Papal States, it had the highest production in its textile industry, especially in silk and hemp. Its university, or studio as they called it, was the most important in Italy and probably in all of Europe at this time. In order for both industry and university to flourish, Bologna had to maintain well-organized internal systems while encouraging an open attitude towards the outside world. That she was successful is reflected in the epithet by which the city was universally known: Bologna la Grassa, fat city, a place of abundance and riches where one could live and eat well. Now, earlier in the 16th century, Bologna had suffered from the turmoil and uncertainty that much of the area went through after the sack and what happened afterwards. Its institutions had been destabilized. But because of the series of appointments of popes, some of them from Bologna or the region, starting around 1560, these popes took note and they appointed as their papal legates, who were their voice and who ruled in their name, a series of men who were well suited to take the situation in hand, reorganize the city, and work with the Senate, which was comprised of a small family of aristocrats who duplicated themselves in terms of ruling the city, and that kind of incestuous rule had done bad things to Bologna over the years. Before I just talk briefly about these people, I wanted to say that this period, I mean, it struck me when I started looking at it, that 1560 to 1600 is a period of such rejuvenation in Bologna. And it runs through all the systems that you can see what's happening, not just in art, but through all of the social institutions. And around 1600, things change. You can just see the change. They are hit with plague, with famines, but also Northern Europe starts to take over that textile industry. The competition becomes fierce, and their own industry begins to suffer. That's just one example, but another one that's important is that you get these new popes coming in, and the interest shifts from Bologna to the nearby city of Ferrara. So all of this, you know, it's like this 30-year period where they're on top of the world, where they hadn't been and now they are not again in 1600. And certainly in art, the scene shifts to Rome at that point. So it seemed to me interesting to notice what happens and how this might have supported the Carracci and patrons who wanted to be more experimental but were worried about their status, right? So that there would be money coming in for this kind of art.